So here's our first quiz, little note. So our test is going to be in a week. It's going to be lots of this kind of stuff. Name my favorite student. Holly, can you read that to me? She gets everything right. Good old Ann. You figured it out? Okay. Some of you, all vectors have both. Okay, folks, can we stop the chatter? Thank you. Magnitude and direction, 1 mark. Number 1, I called this first one question 0 because I was just throwing a freebie in there, I hope. A cannonball is fired horizontally. You know what? This is important mentally, or actually I would underline that. From a cannon on top of a 25-meter high cliff. You know, I need to do a little dulp here, I think. Oh, you know what? I left some room. So I'm going to dulp down here. I'll put the answers up here. Here's my picture. Cliff. Horizontally. What was the velocity? 80. And this distance here was, did I say 25? 25. Okay. I've got my picture. And they want me to find how long the cannonball is in the, they want me to find time. And they want me to find how far it travels horizontally. They want me to find dx. I would do that first. Oh, and then I can say, I actually already know the horizontal velocity. What's the horizontal velocity of this projectile? It's so easy that it's tough. 80. I also know the initial vertical velocity. What's the initial vertical velocity of a horizontal projectile? Also so easy that it's tough. 0. That's the one that kids want to put the 80 there too. No. And what else? They gave me a vertical displacement of that. Well, it looks like I'm going to find time vertically. So I'm looking for an equation that has A, V initial, D, and T in it. It's going to be this one. And vertical, vertical, vertical. Now, this is a quadratic, and normally it's yucky, except there is a 0 in my data. Vy initial is 0, which means this term vanishes, and now my equation modifies. It becomes AT squared over 2. That's the same, Rachel, as a half AT squared. Which means I can get the t by itself without the quadratic formula, without having to find Vy. This is good. Times by 2, divide by a, square root. I think t is going to be times by 2, divide by a, square root. It's going to be 2, negative 25, negative 9.8, square root. It's going to be 2 times negative 25 divided by negative 9.8, should be really close to 5, and then square root 2.2-ish, I'm betting? 2.25, okay. I'm going to write 2.259. I'll write 4 sig figs here because I'm going to use this later. 2.259. In the answer blank, where is it? 3 sig figs. 2.26. Now, if you got that, you get 2 out of 2. Otherwise, if you didn't get that, I would give you, well, a half mark for the answer. I would give you a half mark if you had somewhere, oh, I got to change colors there, Mr. Dueck. Let's go with green. I would give you a half mark if you had done a t-table and you had caught that Vy initial was 0. I would give you a half mark if you got d equals AT squared over 2, and I would give you a half mark if somewhere I saw t equals the square root of 2 dy over a. So you can get full marks without showing all those steps, but Ty, the way I mark your test is I glance at the answer. If it's right, I glance for a few key steps to make sure you didn't just, fluke by guessing, and you get full marks. If it's wrong, then I go very meticulously over all your work, and I say you get a mark for that, a mark for that, a mark for I saw that, good. In other words, do not ever, ever just write down an answer. I had a kid a few years ago who did that. I would give him 3 out of 7. He argued with me partly because I actually kind of think he was copying. But anyways. B, how far does the ball travel horizontally? Well, I'm going to do it over here, and I'm going to make a little note to myself that I now know that t equals 2.259, and they want me to find dx. So if I take that over here, I get dx equals vxt. Oh, do I need to write plus a half at squared if it's horizontal? Heck no. So this is going to be straight plug and chug. It's going to be 80 times 2.259. 80 times answer button. Do you get 181? Again, if you got an answer of 181 meters, you get full marks, 2 out of 2. If you did not, I would probably say something like 1 mark for that, half mark for that, half mark for the answer. Something like that. What else could I ask horizontally off of a cliff? I could ask you for the slanty impact velocity, which is about as tough as I can ask you. Hint, hint. Turn the page. A projectile is launched at 28 meters per second at an angle of 58 degrees above the horizontal. Does it mention a cliff? No? Then I think we're on the ground. So I'm going to dulp. .28 meters per second. Our angle is 58 degrees. And part A asks for what are the horizontal and vertical components. Okay, I can do that. There's Vx. There's Vy, initial, opposite, hypotenuse, adjacent. Cosine of 58 equals Vx over 28. That means that Vx is cos, which we've noticed. You got them backwards? Oh, no. I thought you were doing a, my goodness, what have I done? By the way, I often see kids get these two mixed up, so don't do that. 14.8377. I'm going to write 14.84 up here, but down in the answer blank, 2 or 3 sig figs, 14.8 meters per second. It's 2 marks. How about 1 mark for that component? Sine 58 equals Vy over 28. Vy ends up being 28 sine 58. $23.7. Oh, you know what? Let's carry some extra sig figs up here. How about 23.75? But it'll be 23.7, not 0.8, because here's the original value, and I wouldn't round up the 7 meters per second. 1 mark. B, what's the maximum height that the projectile reaches? And C, how long is the projectile in the air? Okay. Well, maximum height, that means I'm going to be tackling this vertically. So I'm going to say AY is negative 9.8. VY initial was 23.75. That's not enough. Oh! I know something else when I'm at the top. VY final is 0. And this time they want me to find DY. Okay. I don't know time, so I guess I'm looking for an equation that has A, V initial, VF, and V. The squared D one. The VF squared equals VI squared plus 2AD. The D equals VF squared minus VI squared all over 2A. D equals 0 squared minus 23.75 squared all over 2 times negative 9.8. Bracket 0 squared minus, hey, answer button squared all over bracket 2 times negative 9.8. Notice there's more than one number on the top and on the bottom. So brackets around the top and brackets around the bottom. And you get a height of 28.8? .8 meters. Now, if you got that, you get 2 out of 2. Otherwise, I would give you a half mark for that. I would give you a half mark if I saw that. I would give you a half mark for the numbers. And I'd probably give you a half mark if I noticed that you had clued in that VY final at the top is 0. There's your 2. But again, if you get the right answer, 2 out of 2. Kyle, what's part C asking me to find? Time. You know what? I think I'm going to do that vertically, but now, if I had found time in part A, the shortcut would be I could just double it. I don't have time. So, okay, let's redo. This is part A. Here's part B. Also, still, I think I'm going to solve it vertically. Why? How come? Well, I know this. I know this. There must be something else I know vertically. There is. Yeah? Because I'm starting and ending on the ground, I can go, what goes up must come down. By the way, there is one more thing that I know. Technically, I also know that my vertical displacement is 0. Don't write this down. So I could use D, don't write this down, equals VIT plus a half AT squared. I could go 0 equals 23.75 T minus 4.9 T squared and solve that quadratic, and you would get an answer of 0 for one of your time values, which is saying, hey, at time 0, you were at height 0, you started on the ground, and your second root would be the time as well. You know what? Why bring in a quadratic when I don't need to? Because I think with this, I can find T. I think T is going to be V final minus V initial all over A. It's going to be bracket negative 23.75 minus 23.75 all over negative 9.8. And I hopefully 4.85. I'd take 4.84 as well, but 4.85. Let's go write that in my answer block. And again, I'd probably give you a half mark if you had realized, haha, V final is negative V initial vertically. And then I'd give you a half mark for that. And I guess in this case, 1 mark for the answer because there's fewer part marks to give away. Turn the page. Ooh, some vectors. 2 forces act upon a point Q. Force F1 is 5 newtons due east. Force F2 is 12 newtons due south. Find the resultant force R. 1 mark for a correctly labeled vector diagram. Is there directions in this question? You know what? The number of times I botched that would amaze you. Okay. So we want to add force 1 plus force 2. Let's draw this. 5 due east, yoink, plus 12 due south. I guess a little more than twice as long as 5 to get to 12, yoink. I got a hankering to add these 2 vectors together. Any thoughts on how I might want to draw them? Tip to tail, you don't say. Cool. So I can go 5, 12. I think when you do the Pythagoras, this works out evenly. I think 13. Bang on, right? So here's resultant R. R equals, if you go 5 squared plus 12 squared, square root 13 newtons, and now I need an at. Oh, sorry. So 1 mark for the good vector diagram. By the way, you could also have gone 12 down and 5 across and still got the same vector. I'd give you full marks for that. I need a theta. Yoink. There's theta. Opposite. Adjacent. Yeah, it's usually tangent. Not always, but usually. Let's go. Come on, pen. Tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. Opposite over adjacent. And I get 67.4. What of what? South of north, east of west, what of what? This is south of east. That gets you 2 out of 2. In fact, I would give you 1 mark for the 13, a half mark for the theta, and a half mark for the what of what. And that's why it's worth 2 marks. Number 4 is tough. Number 4 is really tough. Do you know how I know number 4 is tough? Because I saw angles in the question. I didn't see north, south, easts, and wests. I saw, holy schmole, angles. This is going to be cosine law and sine law. I can tell you that almost certainly right now. Plane travels 220 meters per second due east. I've scrolled down. I'm going to do a compass rose again. There's a crosswind blowing at 80 meters per second, 30 degrees north of east. What's the plane's ground speed? All right, so here's our idea. The engine plus the wind gives you the ground. What do they want you to find? What do they want us to find in this question? So they want us to find VG. That must mean they've told us V wind. Did they tell me V wind? Yep. And that must mean that plane travel. That's got to be the engine speed. The plane is pushing itself at 220 meters per second due east according to its little speedometer. But then there's a wind blowing it as well. Okay. Let's be really careful. 220 plus. Ryan, can you read to me the crosswind, please? Magnitude and direction.
80 meters per second, 30 degrees northeast.
North of what?
East.
North of what? North of what? So I'm going to draw east first. What of east? I'm going to go north. How many degrees north?
30.
So it's going to look like that. And it's 80, so about 1/3 as long as the 220. So I should really make the 220 a little longer. I got a hankering to add these two together. Any thoughts? Tip to tail. Right. So the correctly labeled vector diagram is going to look like this. 220, yoink, 80, yoink. There is ground speed, ground velocity. Now, I got a bit of a problem because the angle that they've given me is that one, which is not in my triangle. Can I use that to figure out that one? So what's that interior angle? 150. 150. Okay. Definitely not SOHCAHTOA. Sine law? No pair. Oh, and I see side angle side. I see a little sass. Cosine law. What's the cosine law? I don't need to memorize that. It's on my formula sheet. The cosine law is c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cos big C. V squared is going to be 220 squared plus 80 squared minus 220, 80 cos 150. (220 squared plus 80 squared minus 2 times 220 times 80 times cos 150. Any typos? 220 squared, 80 squared, 220, 80 cos. I think I'm good. Square root. And I get the magnitude is 292. Yeah. So answer 292 units, meters per second, at. Well, I guess the angle that I want, yoink, is that guy there, which looks fairly small if my diagram is roughly to scale. In other words, if I get an answer of 78 degrees, I probably made a typo or something somewhere. Now what? Sine law. The sine of 150 over what's across from it, which is 292.03, equals the sine of mystery angle theta over what goes with mystery angle theta, which is 80. Knock, knock. Who's there? 1 fraction equals 1 fraction. Now, I can't get theta by itself, Emma. I can get sine theta by itself. So I'm going to times the 80 over. And then whatever decimal I get, once I hit equals, I'll shift sign that decimal. 80 sine 150 divided by, hey, I'll even use my answer button since I actually have 292.0344059 blah, blah, blah stored in. Shift sign of that. To get 7.8, 7.9 degrees. .9 degrees. What of what? North of south, east of west? What of what?
North of
On your test, I would make this worth more marks, but for now, since it's worth 2, I'm going to say 1 mark for the magnitude, half mark for the theta, half mark for the what of what. That's a tough question. Don't kid yourself. Just curious, how many of you got that one okay? Some of you. Ben alive? You alive? Okay, just making sure you're awake. Turn the page. Cliff at an angle. This was a lot funnier last year because last year I had a student named Cliff. So every time we did Cliff questions, what? No such luck this year. Projectile is launched as seen in the diagram below. If the height is 36 meters, find the range. Kyle, what does this question want me to find? But you know what I'm going to spend most of my time finding? Time. I've got my strategy. Is the projectile at an angle? Components. Okay. And hopefully I left you guys like a whole page this time. Yeah, okay. Components. I think I'm going to get Vx equals 20 cos 30. In fact, I think I yoinked the same diagram as we had last day in the notes. Vy equals 20 sine 30, because this is going to be 10 meters per second, and I impressed Ashley last day with a 17.32 meters per second, if I recall. That time I didn't do it in my head. I remembered the answer because I taught the same lesson twice yesterday. Is that okay, Ty? Let's keep going. Now let's break it up. We have horizontal, vertical. AX is 0. AY, negative 9.8. VX, 17.32. VY initial, 10. They gave me the height. DY, negative 36. I need to find time. Have I got lots of room still? Okay. So I'm going to do this with the quadratic formula, and I'll do it by finding Vy final and finding time. So if I use the quadratic formula, I'm going to use D equals VIT plus a half AT squared. I'll have negative 36 equals 10t minus 4.9t squared. I'll have 4.9t squared minus 10t minus 36 equals 0. T equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. T equals 10 plus or minus the square root of 100 minus 4 times 4.9 times negative 36 all over 9.8. Inside, when I do the quadratic formula, I do what's inside the square root first. So 805.6. So it's going to be bracket 10 plus the square root of 805.6. Close off the square root, close off the very top, divided by 9.8. One root is 3.9166. And the other root is, so I get t equals 3.917. What if you use the VF method? Okay, you would go like this. Vy final squared equals Vy initial squared plus 2AD. You'd scribble out the squared, and you'd say, hey, You'd say, okay, Vy final is going to be the square root of 10 squared plus 2, negative 9.8, negative, I think it was 36, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we'd go 10 squared plus 2 times negative 9.8 times negative 36. Square root of, oh, turns out that's also the discriminant. You're sort of doing the quadratic formula in disguise. 28.38. And I'm wrong. We have to add the negative ourselves, unfortunately. And then I can go t equals Vf minus Vi over A. It equals negative 28.38 minus 10 all over negative 9.8. Negative 28.3, well, answer button, minus 10 all over negative 9.8. And same value. 3.9166, 3.917. How's that help? Now I know. Come on, there we go. Time equals 3.917. And I can now solve for the range. Vx 17.32, 3.917. $17.32 times answer button. Get a range of 67.8. If you got that, 4 out of 4. Otherwise, 1 mark for the answer. I would give you 1 mark for finding time in any way possible, depending on your method. If you use the quadratic method, I would give you 1 mark for this equation. If you use the v-final method, I'd give you 1 mark for that equation. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh, and I'd give you a half mark for finding the horizontal component and a half mark for finding the vertical component. But if you get the right answer, Sam, 4 out of 4. Welcome to the big leagues. It gets tougher. I like number 6. I like number 6. I like number 6. Number 6 is a nice question. This one is right on the threshold of fair game for a written question, but it is fair game for a written question. No. I think I said it was fair game for multiple choice if I asked you to find, I can't remember what it was. There was one that was a little bit tougher than this. You know what? I think it was fair game for multiple choice if I asked you to find a velocity and I gave you a vertical distance instead of a horizontal distance. Because if I give you if I instead told you how high up, I'm telling you it's quadratic formula again. And this time I don't think you could use the Vy final trick. I think you're stuck with what you kind of got. Psst. Psst. Shh. Planar attack. Angle. Components. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find those guys. Vx is going to be 34 cos 38. Of course it is. And Vy is going to be 34 sine 38. 34 cos 38. I get 26.79. And Vy is going to be sine. I get 20.93. Okay. Grant, what's this question asking me to find? No. I'm going to find that. What more base? That's going to be part of my strategy. Maybe you're right. But like, what does this question ask me to find? Read me the question.
Velocity that hit the wall.
Okay. You know what it wants me to find, Grant? Look up. That velocity, a slanty velocity, DULP. It wants me to find that, which isn't Vy because it's slanty. It's just plain old. You know what? Instead of calling it final, because that might get us mixed up, let's call it V impact. Gonna make it, Carly? Is it slanty? Well, then that's an excuse to break it up into components. And I already know Vx, 26.79. Vy, I don't know. And you're right, Grant. Although this question is saying find the impact velocity, I think what I'm going to spend most of my time finding is Vy final. Did I say y? Vertical. Ay is negative 9.8. Vy initial is 20.93. I have to go horizontal, where Vx is 26.79, where Ax, nothing. But they gave me our horizontal displacement dx. How far horizontally had we traveled before we ran into the wall? 94 meters. I can find time. How can I find time? What happened to the half AT squared? Nothing. It's gone. A is 0. Time is going to be d over v. It's going to be 94 divided by 26.79. 94 divided by 26.79. 3.50, I'll carry a few extra sig figs, 3.509 seconds. Me too, Ash. And I'm going to send that into the vertical column. T equals 3.509 seconds. Why does that help? I can find Vy final. It's Vy initial plus AT. It's going to be 20.93 plus negative 9.8 times 3.509. Sorry, I can't fit that in there very good. 20.93 plus negative 9.8 times answer button. Negative 13.46. Which is going to go 13.46. And now I go back to my diagram. I can find the impact velocity. How? Pythagoras. Woohoo! 26.79 squared plus 13.46 squared equals square root 30.0. That's the magnitude. I need a direction. Forgot to get the angle? Oh, I forgot the units. Carly is correct. 30 meters per second. at, need a direction. It's going to be what? Opposite, adjacent. It's tangent yet again. So it's going to be tan theta equals opposite over adjacent, 13.46 divided by 26.79. $26.7 degrees. 26.7 degrees below the horizontal. Is that right? Okay, if you got that right, you get 7 marks out of 7. Otherwise, here's how I would give out part marks. 1 mark for that, 1 mark for that. That gets you up to 2. I would give you 1 mark if I saw dx equals vxt. That gets you up to 3. I would give you 1 mark for finding time. That gets you up to 4. I would give you 1 mark for finding v final. That gets you up to 5. I would give you 1 mark for finding v impact. And then I would give you 1 mark for finding theta. Can you give yourself a score out of, count 'em, 28, please?